Hey, welcome to a new episode of the Skin in the Game. I'm your host, John Cimperman, with my co-host,
Tim O'Shei. Hello out there. Hello to you, John.
Great to see you, Tim. Great to see you. Very excited about today's episode. Bringing in an old friend from my sporting days, Lou DePaoli. Lou is the president of General Sports Team Consulting and Executive Search Division. Lou has spent time in marketing and leading the business operations for the New York Mets and the Pittsburgh Pirates, as well as we'll get into a few other clubs back in the day. So really looking forward to chatting with Lou about what's happening really from the corporate perspective. And also, I think if there's any of our listeners or their youth who's looking maybe to get into the business of sports, we can talk to Lou about what's trending.
Yeah, thought straight out of my head, this interview with Lou DePaoli, and I love when you bring in old friends, John, because among other things, it always translates to this. Talk about a guy who can give great advice, direct or indirect, including two guys in a studio here, about how to build a career in sports. Or if you're in sports, here's something we get into with them. Can you transfer those skills into another industry or vice versa? So in short, yeah, if you're a younger person out there looking to get into the sports game on the business side, if you're not so young, but you're in business and looking to pivot and move into sports, there's going to be some great insights in this episode, and I'm very excited to share that with you.
Yeah, and please stay tuned for our interview with Lou, because he's a ton of energy and a fun guy, and he's going to make a great interview.
Yeah, he's fun. He's so fun. You've known him for
probably 20 plus years,
decades,
back in my NBA days. Yeah,
and I'm probably like 35 minutes into a relationship with Lou, but very glad to have met him.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit of news. And for our listeners across the border, it's really exciting to have the Toronto Blue Jays in the World Series. And I've got to tell you, that matchup with the Dodgers is really, MLB has some wind behind it, some wind in the sails. And I think this international matchup and what we're seeing with the momentum with TV ratings and interest is really a great thing for Major League Baseball.
In watching it, I'm any sporting event, I'm always thinking, what are the storylines here, right? And that might be me more as a journalist than as a fan, but but I look for that, and I've got to tell you, people are going to be hearing this at different times, and the World Series may have finished by the time some people are listening to this. But regardless, like I'm thinking of the opening game in Toronto when there was a choir singing "O Canada," and the pride in that stadium, and then now connect this with a bigger picture. And, the tensions between the leadership of those two countries.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean the Blue Jays, who have, mostly American players on them already, and the Dodgers are representing those two, those two sides. But think about the fans. Baseball's, quote unquote, America's game. And there it is being played on the biggest stage in Toronto. Yeah. We talk about skin in the game, like sports translating over to the rest of our lives. That was a great example. Yeah.
No, it was. And Major League Baseball, again, they've really had a great year TV ratings wise. Obviously, we've talked about the rule changes and the pace of game. Those are all been positives. I do like the fact that they're actually borrowing a couple pages from the NFL and integrating more pop culture, I would
Jonas
say.
Jonas
Brothers. I saw that. So, they're really trying to, kind of broaden the fandom and the net of fans, and Major League Baseball's on a little bit of a roll. It's so funny, and we're going to probably talk to Lou about this. Our guest is, every year, baseball is dead and baseball's too slow, and oh my goodness. Well, guess what? More people are in the seats this year than I believe in a decade. TV ratings are up. And the storylines that you brought up, between the Dodgers and the Blue Jays, and, there's drama in every MLB market. Here's something that's also interesting. And, we're listening to an interview with the commissioner of Major League Baseball. And he actually, alluded to potential expansion, adding some expansion teams. And Canada markets, including Vancouver, is one that he kind of circled on the map. might be in consideration. So that would be exciting for not only our Canadian listeners, but I also think the growth of the game.
It would be. I mean, I'll start on the growth of the game. Would love to see the sport of baseball, spread across Canada in terms of fandom. Now, right now, and for a long time, I mean, ever since the Expos became the Washington Nationals, which was what,
at least
90,
at least 15, 20 years
20 years ago. Yeah, I mean, we're talking decades.
No, I think it was 93, 94. Yep.
Yeah. No, I think it was forever ago. So, I mean, the Blue Jays have been Canada's team. That is fantastic. Just like the Raptors are Canada's team, but for both of those teams, both of those sports, there used to be teams in Montreal in baseball, Vancouver in basketball.
Right.
And Canada has great sports cities. Toronto's the biggest, but Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, we could go on. Quebec. Yes, getting baseball up there, I would love to see it. I do wonder how the Blue Jays would feel about it. I don't know how much that will matter or not. I just don't. But I think there's room for both. And
Absolutely.
I think the Blue Jays are proving that as we record this right now.
Yeah, we'll take a look
during
at
the World
that.
Series.
So we'll follow that and obviously follow the series. But before we get to our interview with Lou DePaoli, we have to bring it up on this show is what's happening with sports gambling, and now these indictments and this major indictments with the NBA.
Yeah, this story is mind blowing, and this involves and these are all accusations, right? These are indictments. These haven't been proven. Defense lawyers haven't been deeply involved yet, but in essence, John, you've got the mafia, allegedly in New York, running poker games with NBA figures, a couple of them at these games, and these games apparently, allegedly, are slanted, right, toward the house, right? And then there's also, related, and this is a complicated web here. There's also, what the FBI director called, basketball's version of insider trading going on, separate from these poker games, but, related in the same scheme with, a couple of, allegedly a couple of NBA figures providing information about, who may or may not be in a game.
Yeah.
Right. Which impacts betting. And of course, betting isn't nowadays just about what team wins and what team loses. It could be about a certain player's performance during a game. So when betting can be that granular and you start getting information about a guy's hurt or a guy's going to be stepping out early or anything like that,
right,
it really it puts you in a position, much as insider trading would, insider information on stocks, to make a move.
Yeah, it's there were a couple Cleveland baseball players that are also under investigation, and it's going to get. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I hate to say that, but in many ways, the leagues kind of created this problem. They took in major sponsorship dollars. It's probably the fastest growing sponsorship category out there. So these, I don't want to say these leagues are in bed with sports gambling, but financially they kind of are. And, I really don't know where this is going to go, how it's going to be unraveled. But, it's not a good look for the league. And I do think there needs to be something that changes. And maybe it's what they call prop bets, right? Where you can bet on a pitch or bet on a free throw being made or not, because that could be that's a slippery slope. But something needs to change for, the integrity of the game and making sure that, fans are first. And, it's just it's an awful situation, but, you could see this coming.
Yeah. And it's a far cry from, a decade or two ago when, for the most part, sports wouldn't go anywhere near gambling. You wouldn't even see a major league sports team in any sport,
let alone three
in Las Vegas.
Let
right?
alone three teams in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Right?
So not to say it's good or bad. What's happening right now, if these things are true, and again, they have to be proven, but whatever in there is true, that's bad. That's a problem. That doesn't necessarily mean we're sitting here saying all of gambling should be away from sports. It's not even realistic,
No.
right?
It's just,
but how do you navigate it?
No,
That's,
I mean, as they say, the toothpaste is already out of the tube, right? So,
right.
but
so how do you clean it up and use it the way it's supposed to be used?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. We'll see. But so we're going to keep, obviously, for our listeners here in the Skin of the Game, we're gonna follow this story and how it does impact fandom and us following the games. But in the meantime, let's get back to some lighter conversations, and we're going to bring in our guest, Lou DePaoli, who is the president of General Sports, Team Consulting, and Executive Search. So please stay tuned here for our interview with Lou DePaoli. Hey, welcome back to Skin in the Game, and I am thrilled to introduce our guest, Lou DePaoli, president, Executive Search, and Team Consulting for General Sports. Hey, Lou, welcome to Skin in the Game.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to catching up here and having a good conversation.
Yeah, Tim was asking if Lou and I ever kind of worked together, and Lou, actually, it's our circles just kind of orbited around each other. It seemed, and really never quite connected, but definitely, we shared a few markets and definitely shared quite a few colleagues in the sports business world.
Absolutely. Just goes to show you the power of how small this industry really is. But all the good people rise to the top like us, John.
Hey, well, Lou, for our listeners, could you just give us that kind of that elevator speech on General Sports and your role with the company?
Sure. So General Sports is a global sports marketing firm that, is based here in the U.S., just outside of Detroit in Rochester, Michigan. But most of our company is actually based in the UK. We have probably about 80% of our employees split between two offices in London and 2 hours north of Manchester. And what we focus on, primarily, our primary focus is on athlete representation. So our team in the UK currently represents about 130 professional athletes, mostly footballers, also known as soccer players here in the States. But there's some golfers and some Olympians. There's a few other things that we do, but athlete representation is a big component of what we do. In the UK, we also have a mergers and acquisitions division that helps teams buy and owners buy and sell clubs, mostly again in soccer. And then we also have a consultancy over there that helps a bunch of the EPL clubs on how to improve their business. In the US, when I joined the firm a little over 4 years ago, I built this division that focuses on consulting, similarly to our brethren over in the UK, that uses my experience and some of my staff's experience on helping local sports teams, leagues, agencies, properties on how to drive their business and make it better. Out of that became a very large executive search presence because people knew, like we knew talent. And if we're going to come in and consult and say you need some changes in your staffing, who better than to find that talent than us? And then we also layer that in with some coaching. We do a lot of coaching and training, so leadership coaching, sales training. And then we also have a data insights and strategy division that works a lot with a lot of the international federations and national governing bodies on identifying their fan base and knowing the market size and what the potential is in certain markets. So it's a lot. You name it, pretty much we cover.
Yeah, Lou, I was just going to say, I think you need to do more.
Yeah, we got to add in something else. I don't know what it is, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I could see the trend going up there where, the list will get longer. So, Lou, what are some of the biggest challenges you find your clients are coming to you to help unravel, nowadays in this landscape?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think number one, generating more revenue. Really, like how do you drive more revenue as costs continue to increase in sports? The salaries of the players don't get lower. So, the cost of operating a club don't get any lower. Your travel doesn't get any cheaper. So at some point, you have to figure out a way to generate more revenue. And then what are all the triggers that help you drive more revenue? It's not as simple as, hey, hire 3 more salespeople will generate more revenue. It's a lot more 360 degree. You got to have the right marketing. You got to have the right fan engagement tools. You have to have the right analytics. Everything has to tick and tie together to maximize your opportunities. And that's where we really specialize in trying to help our clients.
Yeah, Lou, I think that's a great point. And the other thing is more competition than ever for that disposable or that, that entertainment dollar. There's more
Yeah.
places now for folks to, spend their money than, just at the ballpark.
Absolutely. And it's a good thing, I believe. Look, I'm used to working in a big market like New York. So there was a ton of competition already in New York with a lot of other pro sports teams. But then you also had to compete with Broadway and all the other things that happen in New York. But you start looking at a lot of these other markets where now there are, there's WNBA teams now for 25 plus years. You've got NWSL, USL, volleyball. You start going through lacrosse, rugby. You start going through, and that dollar, as you said, John, starts to get potentially carved up into smaller pieces. So you have to be a lot more focused and targeted on how do I engage my fan base? And if I can get Tim to come to one game, how do I get him to come to two?
Right.
I got to give him a good show. I got to put on a good time, regardless of whether my club wins or loses on the playing surface. So A, I got to engage. B, I got to deliver a great experience. Or if not, I can go for less money and go to a AAA baseball game, or I can go to a women's volleyball match. Like, you just have to be really, really on top of your game.
Right. Well, you brought up your experience with the New York Mets. I just think it would be really interesting for our listeners to just a little bit of your background and
Sure.
pre general sports days. So if you could just kind of walk us through some of the clubs that you've worked with and for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got my start in professional sports with a minor league hockey startup in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1994. So it was an American Hockey League team. So if people know, hockey, AHL, we were an unaffiliated team that got awarded a franchise, I believe it was in May, to start playing at the end of September.
Wow.
So very fast turnaround time.
Yeah.
I was brought in as vice president of sales, and I started a month before the opener. So it was okay, trial by fire. Let's go. Let's figure it out, right?
Yeah, we need to
But we
sell out
wound up,
opening night. Yeah, we got to sell out
yep,
opening
sell
night,
out
right?
opening night, figure out opening night. That was the first thing we had to do. Our arena that we played in held 12,311 seats at the time. And that's pretty big by back then, AHL standards. And we wound up getting to, I think opening night was about 10,000 and change. And my goal was still, I got to get some sellouts. I got to get that 12,311. So, we focused on that I was there for 2 years. My second year, we finished second in the league in attendance. We had a couple of big crowds over 12,000. And then the Florida Marlins, not Miami Marlins, came knocking on my door for me to come down there and run ticket sales for them at the end of 1996. I was fortunate then, if you're a baseball fan, in 1997, we won the World Series.
Well, Lou, I'm a Cleveland baseball fan, so that really hurts.
I saw
I was
your head
okay. I was
nodding, and I
okay.
figured,
Lou, congratulations on your World Series win. I'll say it.
yeah,
Yeah,
I know a lot of friends of mine from Cleveland, and we feel bad, but hey,
yeah,
you know what? We deserved it. It was a heck of a series. Obviously, extra innings, Game 7, at
yeah.
home in Miami in front of 68,000 fans. Just amazing experience. But then, as I think most people know, that team was, then gutted
Right.
right after we won the World Series. So created a lot of challenges. No one had ever done something like that before, win the World Series and dismantle the team.
Yeah.
The team was also for sale at the same time, and eventually bought by John Henry. And, John bought the club, promoted a couple of us who stuck around, and then we spent a couple more years, again, trying to find a ballpark solution for the Marlins. And I was then fortunate enough to be recruited away to go start something at the NBA league office, which is now considered the gold standard. And most people in the sports industry are familiar with the acronym TMBO, TMBO, the Team Marketing and Business Operations. And our fearless leader back then, Dr. Bernie Mullen,
Right.
I was his first hire that he brought on. And then we started building out the rest of the team with luminaries like Dr. Bill Sutton and Scott O'Neill, who's now the CEO of Live Golf. And we were on the road trying to figure out how to help the NBA manage its brand, grow its business locally, nationally. like you name it, how do we move this business forward? And that was our sole focus.
Right.
Uh, Really an exciting project to be as part of, and the exposure to spending a lot of time with the commissioner and owners of teams. But when you spend 45 weeks a year on the road traveling, it got to be a little much,
Yeah.
you know,
Sure. Sure.
especially with a wife and two kids. So thank God my wife is as patient as she is, because, you know, I mean, we would not be having this conversation today. I might be out there selling real estate or insurance or something.
Right.
But, you know, so after almost 5 years there, you know, Bernie Mullen then went to become the CEO of the Atlanta Spirit, which was the Atlanta Hawks, the Atlanta Thrashers, and Phillips Arena. And he brought me down there as executive vice president. So I oversaw the business side for all three of those properties under Bernie. And then after a few years there, I went back to baseball as executive vice president for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Great opportunity there, you know. So if you're a Cleveland fan, you probably don't have any love for the Pirates either, I'm assuming,
No,
John.
well, I have love for their ballpark because I think that's one of the
Okay,
best venues in all of sports. I really do.
absolutely. I agree 100%. And I had the fortune of being there for almost 5 years. Now, if you remember, the Pirates were pretty bad for long stretch. Let's put it that way. They made it to about 20 years in a row of under 500.
Mm.
I started there in year 16 of that scheme. And, you know, but we had a great time. We grew the business there. We had a lot of success. And then just as the team was turning it around in 2013, I got recruited away then to become EVP for the New York Mets, who were also at that time struggling from a business perspective. The team had not played well. They had opened City Field and just completely just kept missing the mark every year thereafter. So I was able to start there as executive vice president, then eventually headed up their business operations and ballpark operations for the Mets. So pretty big job,
Yeah.
but a lot of fun. You know, we had some success. We grew the business. And then as things happen, as you all know from being involved in the sports world, a team gets sold. You don't always make it through as a senior executive,
Right.
right? So
Right.
with the Marlins, I was fortunate enough that John Henry kept us on board. At the Mets, I wasn't as fortunate. You know, that Steve Cohen wanted to go with his own people or bring in some new people, which
Sure.
is his right. And I understand and I respect it. But he treated us all fairly. We all still kind of cheer for the Mets. But that led me then to joining General Sports and kind of building out this division that I talked about earlier.
Right. Well, and you brought up, people think there's a lot of glamour working on the team side or the sports side. And, Lou, you brought up the example of you're on the road for 45, weeks a year. But even working on the team side, I mean,
Yeah.
the family, the kids, Lou, you moved around to a number of markets, as did I, because in any given city, there's only 2 or 3 jobs heading up sales and marketing for a team. So in order to move up, you really need to move out, right? And
Correct.
that's one part of it. But the other part of it is, I can speak to hockey and basketball where I worked. I mean, you are working every game. You're giving up Christmas in the winter sports. You're giving up Thanksgiving, while there's nothing like it. It's very rewarding career, but it's not always as glamorous as people think it is.
And then Lou, I'm thinking about you in baseball.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that makes hockey and basketball look like vacation on the evening schedule.
Yeah, baseball. I spent 16 seasons in baseball. And I did the math recently. I averaged about 100 games a year. So I was at every home game, some games in spring training, couple of road trips, and then maybe playoffs, depending on where I was with the organization. So it averaged out to be about 100 games a year.
Right.
That's a lot. And by the way, we did that in, about 180, 200 days.
Right. Right.
So
and
you're at the ball. Again, I mentioned my wife earlier. Thank goodness my wife is a huge sports fan. And her and my 2 daughters would come to baseball games. They loved coming to the events. They loved coming to hockey. They loved coming to basketball. Because if it wasn't for that, I mean, literally, you would never see them.
Right.
Except for when I got home at 11 o'clock at night and I was out the door at 7:30 in the morning.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I know so many executives and not nearly as many as you two, but I can think of quite a few who are, great, successful team executives. But yeah, that ownership change comes in. Or it might even just be a general manager or a CEO change or an executive vice president switching up. They're out and they have to make that choice at that point. Do I move to another city or do I stay in this city where my kids are going to school and, and switch it up?
Right.
Yeah. It's a tough call, because at some point I've seen plenty of executives say, you know what, I'm not moving. I'm going to stay right where I am and try to make it work in this market, or I'll consult, or I'll go into other lines of businesses and other verticals. And, and because they just don't want to move the family. And I get it. I totally respect it.
Yeah.
Not everybody's willing to make that sacrifice, but, I was fortunate enough that my wife and my family were, and it allowed us to go and see many different parts of the country here so far. Gave them exposure to, again, one of the cool perks, right, of working in this business, as you two know, is I was at every NBA All-Star game, every NBA Finals, every MLB All-Star game. We were in the World Series a couple of times. We made playoffs. Like, those are fun experiences. By the way, I always took my kids. Every year they knew when I worked in the NBA that the NBA All-Star game is always around President's Week and the kids are off from school. So we would go on vacation to wherever the NBA All-Star game was, whether it was LA, Houston. I took my youngest to Vegas, the year it was in Vegas for the first time. Like, Houston, you just start thinking about all these places, and it was just good family experiences for us.
Yeah.
It's a good family tradition. I want to stay on this for a minute. I'm going to ask this to both of you guys. Because now I'm sitting here thinking, so you see that, that ownership or senior leadership change, you've got some executives who are stepping out of their role with the team. How transferable in your mutual experiences are the skills it takes to run, you pick the department, marketing, HR, legal, business, sales, whatever it may be, for a pro sports team? How transferable are those over to the rest of the corporate world? And vice versa, when you're recruiting in, can you recruit people who've spent 20 years in the corporate world outside of sports to come into sports? Are those skills transferable in?
Lou, you could take that first.
That's why you're here, Lou.
Yeah. No, but I would say, look, I've seen it translate well because, again, you're running a business. If you're working on the business side of sports, it's just like running any other business. Right? You have selling, you have marketing, you have overhead, you have finance, you have legal, you have HR. Like, you have all the things that you would have, have to engage with fans. Like, all those types are clients. You have to move a product. So it's very, very relatable and transferable to other lines of business. That said, I have seen people coming in from outside of sports struggle to make the transition. Not all the time, but it's a high propensity. And a lot of it has to do with just the nuances of sport and the amount of hours. Mm-hmm. If I'm working for a big CPG company and I'm the CMO, I'm getting paid a lot of money. I'm probably home most nights by 6 or 7 o'clock at night. I'm not working on weekends. I may travel once in a while for some conferences. But if I go work for a sports team as their CMO, I'm at every game. Yep. I'm not getting home. If it's baseball, I may have a 10-game homestand where I'm not getting home every night until midnight, being back in the office. Oh, by the way, I'm at the ballpark all day Saturday and all day Sunday. So the skills are definitely transferable between both. It's just a matter of having those intangibles, like being able to put up with the incredible amount of hours you have to put in because it's a 24/7, 365 business.
Right. And to that point, Lou, the brand you're representing or the brand you're marketing changes throughout the season, right? I mean,
yeah.
So the brand perception from your customers changes, and I think it's much more. You got to be a bit more reactive, a bit more nimble, because the brand changes with every game.
Yeah, that's a great point. I used to tell my staff, because my staff knows, I love to eat cereal. Right. So that's just one of my vices. And for morning, I love eating cereal. But I said, if I was working at one of these big CPGs that produce all the cereal, right? They didn't lose a game the day before.
Right.
Right. Like, their manager didn't get fired. Their player didn't get hurt. Their star player's not out for Tommy John surgery. or any other infractions that can happen. So like it's a pretty consistent, like every day you could get out your marketing message. Once every decade or so, there may be something that comes out as you're using a wrong dye or using too much sugar or you're not healthy for kids. But with sports, it changes by the minute.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm even.
So it's
Yeah, sorry to jump in on both you guys,
yeah.
but I'm thinking of other forms of entertainment. Broadway, speaking of New York, Lou. I mean, you were these.
Yeah.
Think of what else you're competing against. Broadway, major, musical acts. So, we'll take the biggest in the world, Taylor Swift or Lady Gaga. So
Yeah.
Taylor Swift just came out with a new album several weeks back. Whatever the reviews are, will that drive her already massive numbers upward or a little bit downward? You get that kind of cycle, but it isn't, John, to your point, it's not week to week. I mean, ticket sales might be week to week, but they're getting that same product, which is Taylor Swift,
Right.
as opposed
Right.
to a team that may be, a team or a quarterback that may be hurt, or a team that might be on a hot streak or a cold streak.
Yeah, well, Lou, you'll appreciate this. When I was heading up the marketing and sales for the Philadelphia Sixers, in Philly, such a warm, hospitable sports town.
For the fans, they're sending you cookies. And
City of brotherly love.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
come on.
yeah. We got off to a 1-9 start, and there were protests and season ticket holder bonfires, and it was really
Oh, yeah.
difficult to introduce myself at neighborhood cocktail parties. So for someone who didn't have the thick skin and the understanding that sports is a very changing and volatile experience, it might have been tough for your typical CPG brand manager to weather that storm.
Absolutely. You nailed it. Like when the team is winning, everybody's your friend, right? But when the
Exactly.
team's not playing well, you hear about it too. Like you go to the grocery store, they're like, "Hey, that's the guy from the Sixers. You guys are terrible. Make some trades." Like, "Oh, I'm
Right.
just a marketing guy,
That's right. That's right. Well, on that, and Tim, I'm glad you brought this up. The other thing too is, and if there are, and this is my advice to young talent who's trying to break into sports entertainment. And Tim, love for us also to get Lou's perspective on this. I really preach to these young kids trying to break into sports is don't put yourself in a sports marketing box. Become more of a generalist. Get experience in other areas. If you can market cereal or you can market soap, those experiences and that knowledge can be transformed, really work in sports. But if you're solely focused on just getting into sports, you may have some limitations. So really get a broad marketing background, get a broad sales background, and then, pursue your passion in sports, but don't put all your eggs in that small basket.
And you're talking, John, about like college majors.
College majors, graduate programs, become well-rounded, and then follow your passion. But again, just don't put all the eggs in that basket. Lou, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so as someone who has a degree in sports management per se, right? I've always given people similar advice. Sports management is great, but I would encourage people to double major, minor in something else, make yourself more well-rounded. And if you have an undergraduate degree in sport marketing, then get a master's in something else, or vice versa. If you got a minor and if you got a bachelor's in history or English or marketing, and you want that master's in sport, fine. But I've seen a lot of people who do the double double, right? They got the undergrad and the master's in sport management. It's like, that's not really going to give you much of a leg up on anybody else, and you've been somewhat limited by those experiences. I'd rather have somebody who actually went through a finance track, or maybe someone who went through a marketing track and got internships at something outside of sports to show you how, as we always say, the quote unquote real world operates outside of sports, and bring that experience into our industry and help us grow it.
Yeah. And how have you seen in the last 5 years, Lou, kind of the rank and file of the qualities needed to, and I'll just focus on CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. What have you been seeing? What are teams leaning towards as far as what they're looking for in a candidate.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we've just filled a couple of CMO roles in the last 6 months. And in both cases, the job spec led with driving revenue, not necessarily about, managing the brand, the brand architecture and your marketing and your digital experience. No, it was, you got to drive revenue. Like, so again, in sports, it's retail marketing, right? You have to be able to drive revenue for pretty much almost any brand in sports. There's some where it's not as important because they're already at the top of the heap. But generally, it's okay. We need a CMO to come in here who understands it's about putting butts in seats.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also, look, we also have to have great brand standards. We have to stand for something, like all of that stuff. But if not, you have to be able to drive revenue, or the days of just being a classic brand marketer at a sports club, just those jobs turn over very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lou, you mentioned revenue earlier, and and said players' salaries are of course going up and not going down.
Sure.
I want to circle back to that point because
Yeah.
I too have heard so many sports professionals, both at the team and league side, but also on the consumer product side. New Era Cap comes to mind here. Really, really
Yeah.
put a stated focus on driving revenue in the last several years. Was there a turning point, or are there certain factors that have come together? And how long, in your experience, have you heard people and seen people really focus very tightly on revenue, perhaps above all else?
Yeah. So look, I think maybe because I've always had that bent, I've seen it. And that was part of kind of what, when we did put Teambo together 25 years ago. It was really, at the end of the day, driving revenue, putting more butts in seats. Like, that was all that. It was best practices and how you operate your business from every vertical within the organization. But I think what's happened is it's just been a slow burn. It's taken a long time for all the other sports teams, leagues, related properties to really figure it out, that, what? If we want to be able to compete, we've got to drive more revenue. And the days of the RSN models, somewhat collapsing here, and being able to give you those big checks that you could count on, now all of a sudden it's like, ooh, how do I make up for that shortfall? Well, I've got to generate more revenue. And how do you generate more revenue? Get more people in your building, sell more corporate sponsorship, and hopefully the people, while they're in your building, are buying more product, or they're buying more product online. So you just have to figure out, like, how do you do that? It's been probably top of mind for a lot of clubs, especially the ones who aren't your marquee clubs who sell out every game, right? I think we all know the Dodgers right now don't really have a problem selling tickets. The Yankees don't really have a problem selling tickets. The Knicks don't really have a problem, or the Lake. You start going through, but you know what? There's plenty of other clubs out there where you could say, hey, you know what? The Pittsburgh Pirates need to sell tickets.
Yep.
The Washington Nationals need to sell tickets. The Washington Wizards need to sell tickets. So, it's just one of those things where now it's become more evident than ever, because with the most leagues having revenues tied to player salaries, that the revenues keep going up, so do the player salaries. So, okay, well, if we want to lock somebody in long term, we better keep rising revenues. So it's become quite the interesting game of cat and mouse.
Before I want to go down that path and talk about how we keep fans, a broad array of fans in this, in sports, and not price them out. But before we get there, Lou, I'm going to ask you to do a little RSN, Regional Sports Networks 101 for our listeners. You mentioned that acronym, RSN.
Yep.
Can you just give people that 30-second or so overview of what those are and were and what's changed?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, going back, so this is where teams were broadcasting their games on your regional sports network, generally cable related, right? Not over the air available. And the way these were funded was through your cable bill, right? Everybody had a subscriber fee. A percentage of that went to the cable company. Then the cable companies would then give a proportion of that back to the RSN, got a percentage of that fee. And then that generated, a lot of revenue that could then be distributed back to clubs for the rights to air their games. And what's happened is, with cord cutting and people using, not watching cable TV and subscribing to all the services that they used to, all of a sudden those available pools of dollars went way down. And then now all of a sudden that model has kind of flipped where there's more people streaming and than there is on cable. And then now there's a lot less money for these RSNs to pay. And, a couple of them have had serious financial troubles, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And they've had to be taken over. And then now, those rights fees for some of those teams whose contracts were up, they saw significant declines in their rights fees. So, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's probably just right sizing. It's just the evolution of the business. And then at some point, everything's going to be streamed, as you see with these national TV deals that come up with MLB and the NBA. There's so much streaming now. But that's kind of the quick down and dirty on RSNs and kind of how they've evolved and why we're in the position that a lot of these clubs are in today.
So, thank you, Lou. And John, this is making me think of a conversation we had a couple of months back with the writer June Lee, who, Lou, if you haven't seen this piece, a great piece in the New York Times over the summer by June Lee about how much it cost him to be a sports fan. And we'd have to pull it up, but it was $4,800 and change. And a lot of that, not all of it, but a good amount of that was paying streaming fees for the different services, right? That brings me to the point, Lou, that we'd love to go down this path with you. And I know, John, I think I can speak for you. This is a big deal to you too. Sports are becoming more and more expensive. Are you concerned that too many fans are going to be left behind?
You know what? No, I'm not. And I've been hearing that for a long time. I remember starting in the business, it was like, oof, this average ticket for XYZ league was above $25.
Right.
That'll never last. It's not sustainable. Well, now that average is up to 60. And by the way, attendance has gone up, right? I mean, Major League Baseball just had over 70 plus million fans again this year. I mean, so it's not really hurting. You just have to be careful that you're not. And I had a conversation with a senior executive of a club on Friday. And his question to me was, what do you prioritize? More butts in seats or more revenue? And I said, the answer is yes. Right? And he was like, oh. I'm like, yeah, my goal has always been as a leader and for our clients when I was running franchises is you want to find that optimal point where you can get the number of bodies in the building and also maximize the revenue. You can maximize maybe generate more revenue on less tickets, but now you're starting to then price yourself out. You have to find that optimal point. Again, it's supply and demand curve, the optimal point of pricing, but it's a simple model that some people have a tendency to forget and say, hey, I can generate X of dollars by generating a game tonight, but if I could do it with 20,000 people versus 30,000, I could cut on some of my costs of staffing. So that's been some of the logic. But what happens then is 20,000 people buy less hot dogs and they drink less beer and they buy less hats and they buy less merch. So it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So my point has always been try to find that right balance of putting the people in the ballpark at the right price to drive the maximum amount of revenue without gouging people and turning them off by saying, hey, our average ticket now is $100. And if only 20,000 people could come, so what? We're making our money.
Right. Lou, you are spot on, and I think there's a couple of examples out there of some organizations doing it right, and I think it's finding that balance between premium experiences, which you can drive more revenue from, but those help offset what I would call value offers. And Lou, I'm going to do a shout out to the folks at the Cleveland Guardians, who one example is they've added some diamond boxes that you're actually sitting closer to the pitcher or closer to the batter than the pitcher, right?
Yeah.
Premium revenue, driving revenue, but that also has given them the ability to offer up a $50 season ticket for the month, right? So you're having these standing room only areas, these communal areas that are bringing in new fans who are, yes, buying a couple of beers, buying a couple of hot dogs. So it's finding that balance. And also, you may do work with, Atlanta or Phoenix, and they're doing some value concessions, right, which are bringing
Hmm.
people in. So you've got to find that balance to make sure you're always bringing new bodies in, but also you have to cater to the premium seat because they pay a lot of bills.
Yeah, and I've seen that in baseball and soccer. And Lou, you speak to this, please. If we look at the different major leagues, or even I don't even want to limit this question to the major leagues. As we look across pro sports, are there certain teams or leagues or sports that are excelling at doing what John's describing here, at making keeping the barrier to entry, or the cost of entry, fairly reasonable, so you can keep pulling in fans and new fans?
Yeah. Look, I think most leagues do that fairly well, to be honest. You have to find that right balance. I mean, I go back to it probably when John and I were first starting in the business. Teams may have had 4 or 5 different price levels, right? Spread across your building. Whether it was a hockey team and you had 20,000 seats, you may have had 5 price levels. Now you may have 40, right? Because if you've gotten a little bit smarter, you learned about demand, you learned about like literally the demand for every seat in the building and every game is different. Every game is valued differently. So organizations become a lot smarter about how to price products so that, on a Tuesday night, if you're willing to go, you can probably get a Sabres ticket for less than you can on a Saturday when the Bruins are in town, right? So if you're a smart consumer, you have to figure that out. But if you're a smart marketer, you let people know, like, here's the times you can come. Here's what we're doing to keep the average family engaged. And when there's demand, you have to raise the prices. And when there's less demand, you don't. And you try to prevent that there's some sort of a reasonable opportunity for people to come. So I think everybody does it to some extent, to be honest. I mean, even your NFL clubs, I mean, the Bills probably do it to an extent. The NBA for years when we were there had mandated that clubs had to offer tickets at $10, right? Probably when you were at the Sixers, right?
Right.
It was,
Well,
you
when I
had
was
to
with the
have.
Sixers, Lou, when I was at the Sixers, I don't think we could have gotten $10. So
That's a good point. That's a good point. But
yeah,
there's certain things like that where you always try to keep something affordable. You want to make sure you have a lower entry point for regular season games, and when it comes to, your postseasons, that's kind of out of your hands. Most of that stuff winds up on the secondary market,
right,
and
right.
demand just causes the pricing to go way up. And that's why you see those crazy stories every year of, oh, it's the Super Bowl. Get-in price is, $3,000 or whatever. You're like, what?
Yeah,
Who's going to pay $3,000? Well, somebody will, because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
yeah. Hey, so Lou, as we start to wrap this up, I wanted to get your view of kind of what sports, at least domestically, are kind of on the rise. What should we be looking at? What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
So, I think we've all heard for a while, soccer. Soccer's been on the rise for a long time here in the States, but I think it's finally starting, even though like MLS attendance this year was down overall. You're starting to see the strength in the NWSL, the USL. You're starting to see it really taking a hold many years later after all the kids that have grown up playing soccer. There's finally, I think, some growth still in soccer. I'm a big fan of volleyball. I do think that volleyball is a really fun spectator sport to watch live, and you can see the rise in the last few years, especially in women's volleyball, because it's so technically sound. They're extremely athletic, and you see that like Nebraska puts in 90,000 people for a volleyball match. It's like, really? Like, that's incredible. I love seeing that. I think there's real opportunity for soccer to continue to grow, volleyball, you have lacrosse, you have rugby. Like, there's a lot happening here, but I still think soccer still has some growth opportunity as well as volleyball. And I'm always going to say baseball
Yeah,
because
baseball can, every year, oh, woe is me. And then every year attendance and ratings are up. So good for baseball. And by the
correct.
way, you know,
Everybody has written off baseball for years. I think my entire life, I've always heard, oh, baseball this, baseball that. Baseball brings in more people, just Major League Baseball brings in more people than the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and the WNBA put together.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So, and by the way, there's still growth opportunity there. They're playing to about 75% capacity.
yeah.
You still got more room to grow.
They do,
So
and
I'm always a
yeah.
big fan of like pushing baseball and a big believer in that there's more upside there.
Yeah, and we had really some good conversations here about the kind of the startup, the women's professional softball, and I think now it's a barnstorming league, but I think there's
Yep.
potential there because that game, I kind of compared it to baseball meets pinball and the action and the speed of it. So I think
Sure.
even on the women's side, the game of baseball and softball do have
Yeah.
some great potential.
Absolutely. And with the changes that baseball made a few years ago to speed up the game has really, really helped. A lot
Yeah,
of teams starting the games earlier helps. Now, all of a sudden, instead of, an average night for me getting out of the ballpark, if I was lucky, was 11 o'clock, right? Now, those same people could get home at, it might be 9:30.
right.
The game's a half hour faster. They started earlier. The pace of play is good. Like younger people could stay and watch the game and then become a lifelong fan. And then just little things too, like the changing of the schedule in Major League Baseball so that you could see every team every year play each other, whether it's home or away. But you got a chance to see every club, just a better marketing of the game.
Yeah.
I definitely think baseball is onto something here. And, you're seeing that growing in the attendance numbers. And I think you're going to see it continue to grow significantly here.
Well, that's great because speaking for Tim and myself, we're still tried and true baseball guys, so we agree with you there. Well, hey Lou, I want to
Understood.
thank you for joining us on Skin in the Game, and Tim, it was great to get Lou on board and listen to what he's been up to, and also getting his peek at what he sees is on the horizon.
Yeah, Lou, it's been a real pleasure. And as a side note, and John and I John will talk about this afterward too. The advice that both you guys, but Lou coming on here, gave to people who are looking to build a career in the sports industry, or and even for executives who are in it or maybe looking around, really valuable. So thank you for sharing that wisdom.
My pleasure.
Gained through years of experience. We do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk and share ideas and share mentorship thoughts. So thanks for having me on.
Awesome, thanks Lou. Talk to you soon.
You got it, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Lou.
Hey, welcome back to Skin in the Game, and really want to thank Lou DePaoli for joining us here. Really insightful. It was great to reconnect with Lou, and we could have probably gone a lot deeper with a lot of our sports marketing trials and tribulations for sure.
And the sports careers questions as well, John.
Yeah.
I always like to I nerd out on the opportunity to learn how to work in sports. I guess because I have a daughter who wants to do it, and and you and I've both worked with a lot of young people who want to get into this business. So it strikes me Lou is a guy much like you, John, who built an incredible career in it and knows and knows what that looks like. But especially interesting because now he's out there recruiting people, not necessarily into the field, but recruiting people like you and him, people who are like CMO, chief marketing officer levels, other C-level employees, to go help lead sports teams. So unique opportunity to pick someone's brain about that.
Well, I loved his career with the exception of him taking a World Series ring from what were then my Cleveland Indians. Other than that, I was really happy with Lou's career.
So, Lou, I wanted to ask you how big the ring is and if it weighs your hand down when you put it on.
But to just think of the great career, and what we didn't get into with Lou because we got into so much else was really the kind of the comparing and contrasting, the marketing of a smaller market team, in that case Pittsburgh, with his experience with a big market team in New York. And we're going to get Lou back on to kind of compare and contrast. I do think though, he did allude to the fact, when you're marketing a team in Manhattan, not only you're competing with the Yankees, but you're competing with the theater. You're competing with the, with the Red Bull. You're competing with so many other options. Where in Pittsburgh, you're really, at least during the summer, really the only game in town. So, we've had that kind of common theme. Just because you're in a big market doesn't guarantee you're going to put a butt in every seat.
No, you got more people to draw from and so much more to compete against. And, in a place like Pittsburgh or Buffalo or Cleveland or, Oklahoma City, whatever it might be, you may have, you still have competition. You may have less competition, but then it's, are those fans going to spend $300 for a ticket? Or are they going to go spend that $300 on something else and, put it toward a vacation, put it toward a different sports team? Put it toward a new suit. I mean, who knows, right? But discretionary income is probably more plentiful in the bigger cities. In the smaller cities, you're competing for people's dollar.
Right. Right. And it was encouraging for Lou's optimism when it came to not pricing out the average fan.
He shot down my question there in a way that I appreciated, and shot down maybe not. It's not what he was trying to do. But yeah, because as prices go up, that is a good point. And I was thinking back, John, to something you brought up, your trip to Cleveland last spring, summer?
Last a couple times a year. Head back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there are in most pro sports, and I do think particularly baseball is good at this. But hockey, basketball, I mean, the NFL, to Lou's point, they all have it. There are entry points that are much less in cost. Now,
yeah, although I'll be honest with you, I see it in baseball. I see it in Los Angeles. I mean, the owner of the Clippers has, tickets sub $20 to sit in a building because he wants that raucous crowd.
I've seen it in Boston with the Bruins.
Yeah, I haven't, but and any of our listeners can correct me, I haven't seen it in the NFL because, again, you're looking at 8 to 9 home games, limited supply, high demand. I think with the exception and with a fan or a family day for a preseason game, I just hope NFL also has options for the average fan to go experience a game, especially that next generation of fans. Unfortunately, things like PSLs and things like some of the costs of the food and beverage in that environment are going to prohibit new fans from experiencing it. So let's hope that the NFL also has those accessible ways for people to experience a game.
And, it's been a little while, John, since we've done a brainstorm on skin in the game. So can I put you on the spot?
Sure.
With one right
that's the fun part.
Where would you put it let's say we're not building an NFL stadium. You and I talk frequently about one or more that are currently being built, but those are designed and kind of locked in. What would you do in an NFL stadium to pull in some people?
I've got an idea.
Okay,
I've got an idea. How about a standing room only end zone, right? Without seats, but just standing with, and you have the safety bars because everybody at an NFL
the
game.
Buffalo Bills were going to do this.
They could have reinvented the rock pile, or in Cleveland reinvented the dog pound. But let's dedicate, let's say, 4,000 tickets in an end zone, and those are not sold. Those are available on a weekly lottery basis,
right?
And it's the luck of the draw. And again, they're not free. The ticket might be $30, it might be $50, whatever it is, but opening it up to new fans every week. That would be fun.
That would be interesting. And I jumped in on you and I said the Buffalo Bills were going to do this, and I want to fact check and just put a little context around it. There was a point in the Bills stadium planning process where they were considering in an end zone putting in what's called safe standing, and that's it sounds like you've seen it.
Soccer.
It's
you
soccer.
See that in European soccer.
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So and you do have an assigned spot, and you're standing, and there's a safety bar that helps you, frankly, not tip over into the next row. and there might be a little bench behind you where you can sit. It's not really it's a bench. It's not a comfortable seat, and you stand the whole game. And so for whatever reasons, the Bills opted not to do that. Now that's fine. I don't know that those seats would have been $25. I don't know what they would have cost.
Right.
I'm going to guess they would have been still somewhat pricey. But they would be, that's an option, and there's a way to do that. So yeah, that's one.
Yeah.
You're right, though. I think it just, and I've traveled around the NFL a bit. You don't see as many stadiums or teams offering that kind of low cost, plentifully available entry points.
Right.
And in NFL's slight defense, there are not that many games, so they,
and to Lou's point, bringing full circle to our it's all about driving revenue,
right.
and it absolutely is, and today's marketing person really needs to be focused on ROI, but also you always do need to create that opportunity for that next generation of fan.
Right.
So finding that balance. Maximizing revenue where you can with sponsorships and club seats and premium seating, but also hopefully, and Lou brought this up, finding that way to offset some of that with those family nights, value nights. What else can you do to make sure you're bringing new people into the building?
But if you're the NFL, which I have to admit I don't know off the top of my head the NFL sellout rate, but I've got to think it's pretty high. There, the vast majority of those tickets are being sold at a high price point in nearly every stadium every week. Can you count incredible TV viewership numbers, which are high and going up, as bringing in new fans? So, there's a lot of young NFL fans out there who love the Chiefs or the Bills or the Eagles, given their success, right? And they may not, for any number of reasons, including money, make it into a game, but they love this sport, and maybe they're out playing flag football now too. Does that count in terms of bringing in those new fans?
I don't think it comes close to that personal experience, generational, emotional experience that you have of attending that first game with a father, a mother, a grandparent, because that lasts a lifetime. And it's just tough to get that emotional bond, through a television. So
I'm with you. I agree.
I hope so. But with that, hey, I want to thank Lou DePaoli from General Sports for joining us today on Skin in the Game. And I also want to thank everyone for tuning in. Until next week.